Okay, let's talk a little bit more about protein. We're going to talk about how much protein we need, where it's typically found. Okay, so where is protein found? You find a little bit of protein in animals or in plant sources, but protein is mostly found in animal sources, right? So how much protein does somebody need? There's a couple different ways to look at this. One way to look at this is your average adult needs 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight. So someone who weighs 220 pounds is 100 kilograms, and they would need 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight. So they would need about 80 grams of protein a day. Somebody who is half that size, who's 110 pounds, right? So they're about 50 kilograms. They would need only about 40 grams of protein every day. And that's for your average adult. I'd like you to read up in your book a little bit about how certain people need more. Typically, young and growing people need more. Athletes need a little bit more. We'll get to that in a minute. Another way to look at how much protein you should have is by the appropriate macronutrient distribution range of 10 to 35% of calories. Right? So you can calculate it as your percentage of calories, and that sort of makes sense, right? Somebody who needs more calories is going to need more protein. So what's the downside of too much protein? The downside of too much protein is heart disease, right? Because lots of our good protein sources are also excellent sources of fat. So we may have extra fat, and we'll talk more about fat when we get to that section. Too much protein can actually interfere with calcium absorption rates, can lead to osteoporosis. High amounts of protein are also highly correlated with kidney stones. So that's one downside to too much protein. Remember that protein does not necessarily mean added muscle. It will be used for energy. So when we're talking about protein, we have to talk a little bit about how some people in the world don't get enough protein. In the third world countries, some people don't get enough protein. And I'd like you to go ahead and read about this in your book. I'm not going to cover it here. But go ahead and read up on protein energy malnutrition, kwashiorkor, and marasmus. Understand the basic differences between each of those. Your book explains these well. So in the developed world, we have lots of people that choose to be vegetarians. So vegetarians and vegans are a little bit different. Vegetarians are usually people that don't eat meat products, and people who identify as vegans usually don't eat any animal products whatsoever. So vegetarians, no meat; vegans, no animal products, not even milk or cheese or dairy or anything like that. So vegetarian diets may reduce the risk of several chronic diseases. Right? These include things like heart disease, diabetes. Now, the benefits of this can probably be achieved with a diet that uses lots of lean meats or uses lean meats in appropriate amounts. So it's not that completely the lack of meat that tends to make vegetarians have better health outcomes. It's more likely just not too much meat. And it's more likely that they eat lots of vegetables. So if you eat a diet that's rich in the appropriate fruits and vegetables and appropriate amounts of lean meats, you can probably have the same health benefits. Okay, so vegetarians do have to be a little bit more careful to make sure they get enough protein. They'll have to mix different foods to ensure that they get all of their essential amino acids. So when we talk about athletes and protein, athletes require more protein than sedentary people. However, they also require more calories, so they tend to get more protein than sedentary people. So protein supplementation is usually not required or helpful. So if you have somebody who works out really hard every day, that person could be somebody that's training for a half Ironman, triathlon, or a marathon, and that person does aerobic exercise for 2 hours a day. That person is going to eat more. And when they eat more, they're going to get more protein. If you have a weightlifter that goes and hits the weights really hard for an hour every day, they're going to burn lots of calories. They're going to be hungry. They're going to eat more. They're going to get more protein that way. So while athletes need more protein, both endurance athletes and strength athletes, protein supplementation is not usually required or helpful. So that's it for the PowerPoint. Make sure and read this chapter on your book, Chapter 6. Pay special attention to what's in the margins, to the questions at the end of the chapter, and use the discussion forum if you have any questions.